This is the CHRILLCAST. I'm Chris.
And I'm Will.
And I'm Hey with AllThatFilm.
And hey, tell everybody who you are.
I host a movie, TV, film, basically anything that you want to find that's filmed with a camera, we touch on. And there's a bunch of different people that we have on. It's not just me blabbing about movies. I usually have someone paired with me. Hopefully, because we're doing this here, we can get the CHRILLCAST guys to come on ATF SmackDown and argue about The Last Jedi and tons of other things.
Will would gladly talk about how much he dislikes The Last Jedi.
For sure, yeah. I'd love to have it eventually. Hopefully it's in the cards.
There you go. So what's today, Will?
Today is Faceoff Friday. I almost said Fandom Friday, and I was like, I tripped up on it.
I mean, we are fans of this show, so it wouldn't be wrong. But today, what is the topic? I can't talk. The topic today is, should Avatar, The Last Airbender, be remade? I'll say the Netflix adaptation that's supposedly in the works. Does it even need a remake? And before we argue about that, we need to tell you who's going first. So, hey, you need to pick somebody to go first on this topic.
I think I know where Will's siding, so I'll let Chris go first.
Hold on one second.
I'm glad I don't have to go first this time.
I'm not prepared. No, I'm just kidding. I do need to look at something real quick.
Chris is like, wait a minute, I forgot to prepare.
How do I say the main character's name?
I'll go first in making the case, but I want you to tell everybody which argument you're taking. Like, are you for it or against it?
I'm saying no.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And I'm for it.
Very nice.
Is it bad that I'm not gonna say it? All right, so I'm gonna tell you guys why the Netflix adaptation needs to happen. Okay. All right. Let me make sure I'm not screwing up the rules here. So Will is obviously against it. He's gonna go second. I'm for it. I'm gonna go first, based on the judge selecting me, which I was counting on him going against Will's wishes and selecting Will first, because then I can just tear into Will's argument. But I can't do that today.
Yep.
So I'm going to make my case, and then you'll have the opportunity to ask one question. Will is allowed to object per the Adam Corlick rule that was added that you haven't seen yet, because nobody's seen that video yet.
Okay, cool.
So objections work as follows. If Will hears something and he's like, that's BS, he's going to be like, I object. And then you get to choose to say, yes, I sustain the objection, that point makes no sense. Or you say, sustained, and nope, that objection is BS, and the point is let stand.
No, you screw this up. You say, sustained if you agree with me.
Overruled if he disagrees with you.
Overruled?
Right. I'm
okay,
sorry,
cool.
I said that wrong. Will knows what he's talking
good.
about. So basically, it's just like yes
I
or
object.
no.
Chris is an idiot now.
All right, 3. I'm gonna give you guys my 3. Hey, I'm gonna give you my points. Okay. I don't know why I said 3. I'm just out of it. Okay. All right. Avatar video is playing in the background. So the reason we need a remake of Avatar is because the live action film did it so poorly. Like, how can that be the last taste of the Avatar Last Airbender in live action we get? Like, no, we need to erase the bad stain that is the Last Airbender movie. We need to make something good that can represent the series in the same way that the cartoon adaptation did, in a way that everybody can come together and watch the Avatar again in a new way, reimagined, but hopefully sustaining a lot of the elements of the cartoon series. And namely, what we need is good, relatively unknown actors that can portray these characters. So, like, we're not typecasting like a Daniel Radcliffe playing the Avatar. It should just be the weirdest thing ever. So we just need like good, relatively unknown actors to play the characters in this show, and they need to be not typecast, because I don't want typecasting, but they need to be relatively skilled in the martial arts so that they can show actually good bending technique. It's not going to be reliant on CGI. And I think we need good directors that can really capture the same things that the cartoon series caught with the production of that. And if you can get all of these things together, we can reimagine the Avatar as a live action TV show. And given that Netflix has done some good things like The Witcher, I think The Witcher is excellent. I have a lot of faith that Netflix could portray this well if they had the right cast in the right direction, the right producers on board. Everyone disliked that. That's like
Perfect timing.
Do I get a question for you now? Correct?
I'm sorry, I'm not done yet. One more.
Okay,
question.
my bad.
I'm sorry.
I object. This is too long.
I also want to see really good music. Music can sell or ruin this show. So the ambience that we saw in Avatar was some of the best background music of any TV show I've ever seen. And the sound effects that went with it. It was just magical. It really captured the experience for me. So good music, good cast, and it has to be well produced without trying to hit trends. Just give us the show in its entirety with the story intact, and you could probably do it, and it would be successful, and we could clear the air from the Avatar Last Airbender live action movie. So yes, you can ask me one question.
Okay, so my main question for you is where specifically, I guess it's a two-parter kind of. Do you want it to be verbatim, like a shot-for-shot kind of remake, like the Disney films have sort of done with Lion King and Jungle Book? And then two, I guess, on top of that, has anything worked as like a remake for you in that sense, going from animation to live action? Because there's a lot of troubles, presenting that can arise.
That's a good question. It's a good two-parter question. I'm going to start with the first half of that. As far as you're going to have to remind me, what was the first half of the question? I'm stuck on.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. The first half of the question is: do you want it to be like a beat?
No,
for beat
not
remake?
shot for shot. Not shot for shot. Okay, so I don't want them to take creative directions such that they're changing the themes, but I also don't want them to be limited in their scope that they have to do shot for shot remake of the original series, because then you might as well just do CGI and reuse the voices. Like, what would be the point of a live action? But at the same time, the only movies I can think of that were really good adaptations from cartoons to a movie, I actually thought the brain is not working. It had what is that movie called?
Is it one of the Disney ones?
It is a Disney one.
Aladdin, Lion King, Peach Dragon,
none of those.
Maleficent, kind of. Alice in Wonderland?
Nope.
Dumbo?
Nope.
Those are the only. Jungle Book?
Nope.
Sorry, those are all the ones I got.
It's a really important one. I just can't think of the name of it. I thought it was actually really good. Cinderella. I thought Cinderella was actually a really good live action adaptation. I actually, as I watched it with my wife. I didn't watch it on my own choice, but I thought it was really good. Adaptation from a cartoon to a live action film. So I know that Disney has the ability to produce good cartoon to live action. I just think that when you limit it to a shot-for-shot movie and you eliminate Rafiki pretty much from the entire movie, you've screwed up the Lion King. Yeah. And then the, Scar versus Mufasa scene is just ugh. Anyways, shot-for-shot, no. I think they can have some creative scope to it. But at the same time, if you're going to do your own creative scope, don't change the story such that people don't recognize it anymore. Keep your creative differences such that the scene is still understandable, the scope of it's still understandable, and the story is still start to finish the same story intact. But like I said, not shot for shot. Like, you can throw in some new jokes, throw in even some new side characters for all I care, but don't ruin the story that's there, because the story that's there is epic.
Gotcha. Then I'm ready for Will's case.
Yeah. All right. So I don't think it should be remade. Basically, in the exact opposite reason for why Chris thinks it should be remade is the fact the last one was so terrible, and I think it really demonstrates the reason why this movie or this TV show is not going to translate very well to live action. I think the art style, and I think that the characters and the way that they demonstrate the powers is so unique to that show that when they try to put on like in CGI on the big screen, it looks super freaking weird. So when they're like bending the water and doing the fire and stuff in the last movie, it looked really weak and it did not look very good. And you can make the argument that CGI has come a long way and all that, but it's never going to capture the same spirit that people associate with the show. So if you're coming into this wanting the characters to look and feel the same, you're going to be disappointed. And then the same thing with just the way the characters sound. You're not going to be able to cast the voice actors to play the characters. And there's not like as far as like a cartoon, you can have such a diverse cast to play the characters. You don't necessarily have to have people who look like the characters to play the characters. Whereas in a live action show, especially now, you have to have people who look the part. So you have to cast everyone, the people from that look sort of like an Inuit tribe. For the waterbenders, you have to have people who are from the proper region that's demonstrated in a lot of the show. So the voice acting is going to be very different. Whereas, in the cartoon, if you look through the cast list, you can see that it's pretty diverse. There's a lot of people playing a lot of different looking people playing those characters, and that brings very interesting voices to that cast where that was not reflected in the TV or the movie adaptation. And then again, we don't need a movie. We have the TV show. I would much rather them just have an extension onto that show or continue with the Legend of Korra, right?
Yep.
The Legend of Korra show, or have a completely new show that follows another Avatar. That would be really cool. And I'd much rather have that because again, it has this cool blend of anime and like Western animation that's very unique to the show that just doesn't. You're not going to capture that with actual people. Maybe you could have like a hybrid thing where you have like CGI hybrid, like they sort of done with what were those movies? Like Beowulf. Like it was CGI, but it was actually like live action.
Yeah, gotcha.
That could be an interesting way of doing it, but I still think that again, it should just be left to the show. It should not. They're never going to recapture the spirit. The TV show already holds up. You don't need to worry about casting the right characters because you know that if they cast like one, I don't want to get political, but if they cast one person wrong, it's going to completely destroy the show. So I think that they should just stick with making cartoons. And that's my opinion. Do you have a question for me?
Yes. Yeah. A lot of points you had there.
Yeah.
My question.
I know it was like
that...
a rapid fire. My bad.
No, you're good. No, it was good. I guess my question would be, because you mentioned, why don't they make another show? Specifically with Kanitsuko and Brian, the two creators of the show, they are on board for this. I think they are directing some of the episodes too. They have not had the same success met with Korra, and I know one of them went on to do Voltron, one of them went on to do Dragon Prince, because those shows have not caught an audience as well. What is your argument for, this show will make Avatar even more popular, maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, because Game of Thrones has sort of opened the floodgates for high concept or a higher concept fantasy story, that is something like people would want, and then more people would initially watch the show, and if it were made, I know it's a big if, but if it were made right, then you get people even arguing like, now I gotta watch both to see which one's better.
I mean, yeah, that's a fair argument. If it ends up being really good, obviously I'll be pumped about it. It's going to be very different. And I think that, Chris mentioned how The Witcher was a really good adaptation, but they didn't do an adaptation of the games, they did an adaptation of the books. And I think that's where they succeeded, because they didn't try to copy the style of the games. Geralt sounds pretty similar, but everyone else looks and sounds very different. And although they keep the spirit of the books, it's not the same as the games. So honestly, if it's not a shot-for-shot remake, and they just go in their own direction with this, I think it would be far more successful than trying to copy the show. Because my whole argument's based off if they copy the show, that it's not gonna translate. It's not gonna look as good. But if they do their own thing, where it's like in the same sort of spirit, and it's like the same characters, but they maybe do on different adventures. And the powers are just you have to accept that they look different. It could be better. And then if it's successful, people will probably go back to the cartoon and realize just how great of a cartoon it actually is, and that it has more of appeal than to adults as well as kids.
Okay, so this is very close. Do
We
I
still have
say
our
anything
closing.
before you?
No, we have our closing arguments, and then
Yeah.
you jump in.
That's what I was going to mention. It's very close for me, for both of y'all. I will say, just throwing in like my personal like bias a little bit. I don't tend to lean towards like making a live action remake of animation. I think both people have defended their points well, though. So again, I think just to spice it up a little bit, it definitely will come down to the closing arguments.
Okay.
I think Will's first for closing arguments, right?
The point is, like, he goes after me, then I go after him. That way, he gets to have the last laugh on the arguments, but I get the last laugh on the closing argument. So,
Gotcha.
go ahead.
Yeah, so my closing argument is I just don't think that a live action show will be able to capture the essence of the characters, as well as just a continuation or just watching the original cartoon. Like I said before, the art style is so unique that it really blends in with the storytelling, and they do a lot of the storytelling through that artwork, and that will not translate into a live action film. So, I mean, this B-roll footage in the background here, like basically all of it, a huge chunk of the emotion comes from the animation, and that was, one of the biggest problems with the original movie. So, I just don't think they're not gonna be able to capture that in live action. It's the same reason why The Lion King was so terrible, is because it looked amazing, but it didn't capture any of the emotion from those original characters in the original movie. Even though James Earl Jones is still Mufasa looks terrible and doesn't look right. So even if they had managed to have the same voice actor play the character, it's not gonna feel the same way. So that's my closing argument.
I have the nail in the coffin for you, Will. The nail in the coffin here.
Crap.
First off, thankfully, Disney is not remaking Avatar. Disney has no impact on the way this gets made. Secondly, I have one really great example of animation done that I think would prove that Avatar is possible. Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast with Emma Watson is one of the best remakes of a cartoon ever made, in my opinion, even if it isn't exactly what everybody wanted or exactly what everybody was expecting. It did its own little take in the beginning and the end, kind of showed a little more than what the Beauty and the Beast cartoon showed, where it gave kind of a backstory to the prince and how his redemption story comes across. And it still was faithful to the original story of Beauty and the Beast, such that it didn't change the story, but it added some layers to it. And I think if Avatar went the route like that with a live action and had good CGI in it to help make the story work better, which good CGI does exist nowadays. I mean, look at how great Star Wars looked regardless of how bad the movie was or wasn't in your own opinion. The CGI has gotten to a point where it's very difficult to tell what's real and what isn't. And I think when the Avatar Last Airbender movie came out originally, CGI wasn't there yet, or at least the CGI they used wasn't there yet. CGI we have nowadays can more accurately portray the vast bending abilities that they couldn't portray then. I think if you gave it another shot today, you'd see much better CGI. You'd see a better cast that Netflix could get the money to bring in and do it. And I would love to see what it looks like. Even if they didn't get the cast I wanted, I would still love to see what they did with it. And I think it deserves that second chance, that redemption arc that Zuko got in the original series. Let's give it to the actual live action adaptation of this. Let's give it the Zuko redemption that it deserves. So that's my closing argument.
Oh man, this is close. This is dangerously close. Gosh. I think I really don't want to, just because I fundamentally disagree with the point. But I think Chris did defend his point, I say ever so slightly, and I think part of that is because the live action, and I would have done the same thing in fairness, but the live action movie is so easy to point to and be like, hey, this is terrible. that it's easy to sort of focus on this. Whereas Chris brought up a couple of good exceptions to that rule. Like even if you don't like Beauty and the Beast, that still has a beast that like looks good. Things like Star Wars, which I don't know if this will have the budget to do Star Wars effects. But I like that you brought up The Witcher as well. Even Game of Thrones, like more recently. You know, if Netflix thinks this can be a huge show, then great. The only thing I would say that I actually haven't seen The Witcher. Will, have you seen The Witcher?
I have, yeah.
Okay, is there CGI that good in The Witcher?
No.
Okay, because the only thing is, like, as much as I do enjoy Stranger Things, the CGI in that show is not the best.
I would say the CGI in that show is better than The Witcher.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so maybe it. Well, I guess because Chris only brought that up briefly, but I think I could have heard like more of that, like defended because like Disney does have like bad remakes, but I feel like that's like even The Lion King, from like a stylistic point of what they're trying to do with photorealism, it's like okay, that's cool. But then you're right, they take out all the emotion out of it. Whereas I don't think that's going to happen in Avatar because they do have human beings that can still emote. And they're not, hopefully they don't have, you know, Aang just not smiling and saying, Katara, you saved me from the iceberg. But yeah, I think unfortunately, like it's easy to get caught up in the movie being so bad and so haunting. That's where like the slight edge goes to Chris for me.
Okay.
So,
well, you're dead to me, but that's fine.
Do I win? Am I the winner?
In fairness, if I was doing this non like fair, I would for sure side with Will 100%. I don't think the show needs to exist. The only thing I would give this is are you guys familiar with the books?
Mm-mm.
No.
If they wanted to do a live action version of all the books, because people have sort of been complaining. They're like, why didn't we get season 4 of Avatar? Why did we get Korra? And like, I sort of get that, but also like Avatar sort of ended. Like it can just end and it's fine. But I think if they did like a live action version of them, like through their teen years, that sort of would work for me. Just because that is like almost ancillary, like tacked on. Whereas like for like me and Will were mentioning, because the show exists, and if they even do something remotely similar, you're going to compare that to, you know, gold that's already come out. So
Yep.
I'm Chris.
And I will.
And I'm Hey with all that film.
And we will see you
on the next CHRILLCast. Oh, yeah!